the small grains are great for the soil. It's been wonderful to break up our workload. Um, if you're used to just working in the spring and working in the fall and you don't really want to change that, don't start raising small grains and don't start raising hay. We're not quite to the level of dairy farmers. I've got a brother-in-law who's a dairy farmer, and we don't do near the amount of work that he does year-round, but we are very busy from 1st of April through the end of November anymore, doing all the different things we do. Some of it's related to raising small grains, some of it's related to hay production, a lot of it's related to direct marketing those things and things related to that. 3 years ago, so if you go back to winter of 14 going into 15, if you would have looked at the equipment we had on our farm, it was all geared for one thing, producing corn and soybeans. All the equipment we owned, that's all it was good for, just raising row crops. So when we started thinking about expanding our rotation and going to some type of a solid seeded crop like a small grain or hay, we knew immediately that we were either going to have to hire other people to help us on the equipment side, or we were going to have to figure out where we could find our own equipment that we could afford that would allow us to do what we need to do. So I mentioned the grain drill. It's over in the shed. We had to go up to northern Wisconsin to find that. That was in the spring of 2015. And that's a 12-foot wide box drill. Nothing real spectacular, but you do a little tillage, and it works really well. It's got 6-inch spacings on the openers. It works great for seeding oats. It's got a grass seed box on the front, so we can seed a small grain and a forage crop at the same time. We had a way to straight cut oats. We didn't have any way to swath them. And that, you look around equipment dealerships in Iowa and trying to find a swather with a draper swather with a belt platform on it is almost impossible. You can find 30, 35-foot draper platforms to put on your combine, but I didn't have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to put into something like that, and I didn't have a combine big enough to use it anyway, so I knew we had to come up with a different strategy there. So found this old self-propelled Massey open station swather. We ended up swathing about 10 acres of our 32 acres that year, and then we straight cut the other 20. The swather worked okay. It really struggled on stuff where the underseeding was a lot heavier. Just didn't do a good job with that at all. So part of our field, the seeding was a little more subdued. It worked okay on that with the oats. We ended up straight cutting the rest of the field where the underseeding was a lot more aggressive. Even though the swather we had that year wasn't the best machine in the world, I really liked what it allowed us to do there. I mean, our oats were very clean that year. Didn't have a lot of weed pressure. So weeds weren't really a big deal, but I really liked, as I learned more about oats and the sweating process of the grain, one of the things you learn there is that you straight cut oats, they got to sweat in the bin, so you got to put air on them and let them do their thing in the bin. If you can lay them down out in the field, they'll do that naturally while the grain's on the stalk, and you can put them in the bin, and they've already gone through that, and some people would say you may gain a little test weight being able to do that too. Don't know about that for sure, but that could be true. Anyway, so that's kind of where we ended up in 2015. Going into 2016, that's where this thing comes into play. We planted our oats again, watched them grow. It was getting closer to harvest time, and I remembered the troubles and trials we had with the old Massey the year before. And I said to Matthew, maybe we ought to try to find something else. This was like, so we were looking at oats being ready late July, early August, and this was like late June, early July. I'm looking around trying to find something. And along with that, Clark Porter here. So Clark has some farmland down by the Rhinebeck area, and he's been another farmer in Practical Farmers of Iowa that's been interested in small grains, and he's raised some and learned about that. And anyway, I thought, well, I'm going to call Clark up and just see if he would be willing to because I didn't really want to foot the whole bill for a swather that year. We just bought one the year before and a lot of other things. I thought if I could find one, I wonder if he'd be willing to share the cost on it, because I knew we both needed one. And anyway, I located this swather on an online auction. It was up in northern Wisconsin. It was going to sell like the first week of July. I think it was right after the 4th of July. And I had talked to Clark about it. I said, hey, would you be comfortable on me trying to buy that thing and going in 50-50 on it? I mean, I never thought I would want a pull type header like that, but it's really been nice. I mean, we paid $6,700 for that. It's a 21-foot machine. It's very rare. It's hard to find. Most of the pull type swathers you see are at least 25 to 30 feet wide. So it's kind of a unique size. I knew it would be probably a little bigger maybe than I really wanted for my combine, but I felt I could manage the windrow size with it. Didn't want to go any bigger than that, so I knew it would work. But that's what we've got in that thing. Other than sickle sections and tires, we haven't had to really do anything to it, but it does a wonderful job of cutting. You can hook any tractor you want up to it, and if one tractor breaks down, you can hook another one up, and that's a nice thing to have. But this does a great job of getting oats, even down oats. Like our oats, everything just worked out this year so that they ended up being down pretty bad when we wanted to get them. Matthew ended up swathing the whole field. He swathed the whole field one way, and he did a really good job of salvaging. I mean, if we would have had to straight cut our oats this year, we probably would have lost easily half the crop. But, we probably lost 5% maybe, 5 to 10% at the most in places. But really nice tool. If you do have any weeds in your oat field, which that happens, we don't have a weed-free field out here. If you were to walk around, you'll see there's a few weeds growing. But, the nice thing about the oats is they come off, you get them cut, and you're pretty much cutting them before any of those weeds have got viable seed heads on them. So you're putting a dent in their life cycle there, and the swather is huge on that. It cuts everything dries out, and then it all goes right through the combine really nice. But swather's a great tool to have, really hard to find. Maybe if enough farmers start raising small grains in Iowa, that'll change, but I don't see John Deere or anyone else lining up to start selling these in Iowa yet, but maybe we can be the part of something new there. Anyway, I mentioned this is our combine. Up until 3 years ago, it never harvested anything but corn and soybeans. Got this head for it, and it's a dream to harvest oats in a windrow with it. I will say this too, never knew this adjustment existed in the operator's manual until I raised oats. Anyway, this is a conventional combine. It's got a cylinder, a beater. There's two positions that beater can be put in. I never knew that. I never cared. It always worked just fine in the first position. We were just plugging up something fierce period. We'd hit a big bunch of oats, and I mean the straw was really heavy in places, and I remember the first time it happened, like plugged the combine and just killed the engine right now. I'm like, what on earth happened? I've never had that happen in a combine before. Realized the separator's plugged. After digging it out, we started reading the operator's manual. Is there anything we can do here to make this better? And lo and behold, there was. You can drop the beater down, open that throat up a little bit more, and now you might plug once in a while, but you can always get the plug out without opening the combine up and digging it out by hand. Wonderful piece of information. So anyway, but it's awfully nice to. One thing I will say about spreading out the workload of the small grain, it's really nice going into fall knowing that the whole farm doesn't have to be combined from the 1st of October to the 1st of November, give or take a week or two. It's just nice to get some of the work done in the summer when the weather's warm and nice, and so that's really helpful. It just it spreads your planting load out too, because you plant your oats in the spring, up to a month or more ahead of when you might be planting your corn and soybeans, and so that allows you to get by with smaller equipment, and just makes your life a little easier, a little less stressful. Any questions about any of this? This stuff works for oats. It worked for wheat, barley, any small grain. Nothing. I didn't have, other than getting this head, I didn't have to do anything different to this combine. All the settings for harvesting these small grains are right in the operator's manual. This is a 1992 combine, 25 years old, so I don't even know in the new operator's manuals if they put all that stuff in there, but everything's in there for all the small grains in my old operator's manual, so we've just learned how to use it. I've mentioned that along with raising oats, we knew we wanted to bring some hay back to the farm. I just, along with, the rooting that like oats do in a field does wonderful things for the soil, but I knew I wanted to go beyond that and get the benefits that you get from, things like alfalfa and clover and other grasses. And we wanted to not just create a 3-crop rotation. We wanted to go at least 4. Maybe in time we'll be able to go further than that if we can learn how to raise some other things. But anyway, with hay production, again, we raised oats for the first time on a significant scale in 2015. Didn't have any hay to harvest that year, so didn't think a whole lot about that. Fast forward to 2016, got our oat crop growing, and got this beautiful field of hay growing over here, and didn't own any hay equipment. So fortunately, I've got a neighbor lives a couple miles from here. He raises a lot of beef cattle. He was salivating over my hay field every time he would drive by, and he stopped in one day and he said, "Hey, what are you going to do with that hay? I'd be willing to buy that off of you if you don't have a use for it." And as it turns out, that's what we ended up doing. I hired another guy that I know to come in and mow it, and I had the guy that was going to end up baling it and take it. He came and raked it, and ended up basically, the weather was terrible. That was like early June of 2016. Just couldn't hardly get a dry day at all. And he ended up putting them all up in round bales and wrapping them in plastic and essentially making silage bales out of them. And that ended up being a blessing for us. But, I looked too at the check I got from him for that whole crop after that. And, I've always got numbers rolling around in my mind, and I thought, we need to do better than that, and we need to find a way to do better than that, because I know the value that was sitting in that crop, and he gave me fair money for it, all things considered, but the package size rules the day when it comes to hay production if you're marketing it. So that was early June of 2016. I knew in 30 days we would have to do that same thing all over again, or we needed to find a way to do something different. Like oat harvesting equipment and planting equipment, not a lot of hay harvesting equipment to be found, especially if you want to make small square bales of anything. Everybody and their brother 30 years ago knew where they could find a baler within a couple miles, but that just isn't the case anymore. So we... I think it was, late June and early July in my life in farm equipment. But we started scouring the used market again, and I knew I wanted a disc mower, because my neighbor had come over with his old New Holland sickle mower and made about 2 passes that year on first crop and got fed up and left and said, "Go call the other guy with the disc mower and have him come in and mow it." So that's what we did. So I got to see firsthand the comparison there. We had very thick, lush hay, and I knew we needed to be able to cut it well, and not fight out the whole time. So we started looking around, found it. This is it was a 2011 model when we bought it in 2016, so it was about 5 years old. I had to drive up into southwest Wisconsin to find this, because it's only 10 feet wide. You can find a lot of bigger ones, but I knew I didn't want to lay down a real big windrow. This was about as big a one as I wanted, and was able to find this machine in good shape. Price was right. Found it at a little bitty farm equipment dealer up there in, what's the name of the town? I can't even think of it right now. It's just, what was it? Bloomington, Wisconsin. It's just straight south of Prairie du Chien. Beautiful drive down there. Anyway, we bought this thing. I mean, so we're like a week out from needing to cut hay, second cutting. I didn't have a baler. I didn't have a mower. I didn't own any hay racks. But I know that we can start paying for a lot of this stuff real fast if we can find a way to do this. So I'd have to go back and look at the timeline on it. Within about a week, I started buying and running all over the place. I went up to Wisconsin. I pulled this thing home. Right here, this is a tedding machine. I bought this thing. The only two things we've bought new for any of this stuff is this machine and that rake right there. This is a tedding machine. That is a rotary rake. I knew I didn't want a wheel rake. I saw what they did and all the dirt and stuff that pulled up into the hay. I think we may want something different there because we want to produce a quality product and get a good price for it. So I think we need to go out and find something different. Again, hard to find rotary rakes, especially hard to find little rotary rakes. There's lots of big ones you can find, but most of them were a long ways away. So anyway, we bought this out of Wisconsin. We found a local coon dealer within about 20 miles of here that we could buy both of these pieces of equipment. I'm sure everybody understand what the mowing machine does there. Goes through the field and it cuts the hay, and you can either spread it out the full width of the machine behind it, or you can pull those forming shields in on the backside and you can make what is called a windrow. And that allows the hay that you've dropped to pass between your tractor tires. You don't run over it. It's in a nice, neat line to pull up with your baler and all that good stuff. Well, anyway, so that's how that works. I didn't know anything about tedders, but as I started researching haymaking and talking to people that had experience with it, I quickly got acquainted with them and decided we need to have one of these things. What it is, simply, it's a machine you take through the field after you've cut the hay, and it allows you to basically just grab the hay and it just throws it up in the air and spreads it out and fluffs it out. And we've found two wonderful things it does for you. That year, in 2016, second crop, not quite as bad as first cutting, but with second crop, weather just wasn't cooperating. We'd cut hay, it got a little rain on it, it's laying out there, the seeding's starting to grow back up under it, and didn't actually own the tedder yet. Had bought the mower, had been looking at one of these, just trying to figure out which one to get. I saw this going on out in the field, and I thought, if we're not careful here, we're going to lose that crop. So I went and bought this thing, and it allowed us to actually get it to recover a crop of hay that was real close to being lost. I mean, we had, new seeding coming up through that hay. It had gotten like 1/4 of an inch of rain on it, and then another 3/10, and it was laying in a windrow. And it was just, we'd been checking the windrows. They weren't going out of condition yet, but they were starting to lose color and value there. And so we got this thing home. We went through the field. This thing just sucks everything right up off the ground, spreads it out, and then like a day later, it was dry enough we could come through with this rake, put it back into windrows and bale it. Where we've gone with this year, and it seems to work really well, and it isn't a new thing with me, I know other guys that are doing it, is we go out and we'll cut our hay, and instead of spreading it out wide with that thing, we make it in a windrow that'll just fit between the tractor. But then we go right out in the field right after we're done. In fact, we'll have this thing running in the same field that thing's running in, and we'll just immediately spread that windrow out as thin and even as we can over the whole field. And it easily cuts a day or two off your drying time, and it just allows you to put up really nice quality hay. Because then you can come back a couple days later with this rake. This rake, one nice thing about a rotary rake like this is you can manage the tine height so that it's just just not getting into the dirt, but it's getting all the hay, and you're not getting dirt and corn stalks or whatever might have been on the field before up in your hay. Allows you to keep it clean. It's fairly gentle on it. So if you're careful with your timing and your speed with this thing, you can go back out and gather a field that's been spread out into windrows and maintain a lot of the leaves that are there on alfalfa and the quality that you want to harvest. So that works really well. I don't probably need to say a lot about this. This is an inline Heston baler. Makes awesome bales. I'm really glad we bought this. It makes really nice, solid, square bales that don't easily mushroom on you and go out of shape. They stack really nice in the shed. They stack really nice on a trailer. I'm told we don't have any of this stuff, any of this equipment, but if you ever wanted to go to any type of accumulating equipment that allows you to mechanically gather and pick up the bales behind the baler, that you really want a baler like this. The bales coming out of it work a lot better with that type of stuff than most of your offset balers. So there's real quick. So we could have built hay racks, but I didn't have time to do it. Had so many other things going on, and there are people that do it really well. These two hay racks I bought from a guy up by Clear Lake. He builds hay racks all the time. They're 20 feet long. They're 9 feet wide. You can get 200 and we easily get 210 straw bales on there just going up to the top of the fence. You can get close to that. With straw, you can stack them up 8, 9 high and get 250 bales on there if you're that ambitious. With hay, we usually just get about 200 on it and call it good, but that's 50 more bales than you'll get on one of these, and you don't have to worry about them falling off. But anyway, they've got a built-in conveyor here, so sometimes we are able to make good use of it, other times not. But basically, as you unload the rack, you just do it one row at a time. You flip up the next section, and you just set the bales on there, and it spits them out the front. We've got a little fiberglass slide that hooks on the front, so they'll make a 90-degree bend and go right onto a conveyor if you have it set up to do that. Okay, our last thing here, nothing real fancy here. Again, this is it's about a 40-foot long hay conveyor. I had to go to Wisconsin to buy this too. Again, it was hiding in an old dairy farmer's shed up there, and boy, it's a lifesaver. If you're gonna make a stack of hay any taller than your hay rack, you need to have one of these. This was nice because it's got little sides on it, so bale fits right in there, and the sides keep it from ever falling off the side. And there's all kinds of these. It's amazing. When I wanted to buy one last summer, couldn't find one. I found because actually have two of these. We've got an old junky 30-footer that I went and bought last summer, but I wasn't really happy with it, and I found this last fall and bought it, and it's just been wonderful this year. But this summer, I was just looking on Craigslist, and at one point in the middle of the summer, there were 6 to 8 50 to 55-foot conveyors like this. They're all up in Wisconsin for sale. So they're out there if for $1,000 or less sometimes. These tools allow you to work with the weather. It gives us a lot of flexibility, we've found, and they've been well worth the money we have in them.